Captain Robertson with Bigwater Fishing. You know, you hopefully have seen our videos, shenanigans, podcasts, whatever it may be. Well, here's what we're doing now if you haven't seen. A project boat. Why would I buy a 20-year-old boat? I have no idea. But we really wanted to have a little tiller boat. They're kind of a cult-like following. They didn't make them that long. The Ranger 618. We took this just absolutely destroyed, tore up, hit, whatever you want to call it, smashed up boat, and we rebuilt this thing from top to bottom. Part 11 of the project boat. It's hard to believe we've come this many steps, but I can promise you it's been an awful lot of work to this point. And one thing you're going to hear me say several times in this process of the part 11, which is redoing the floor itself and the flooring top there, is, man, this is going easier than I think. Until it doesn't. A lot of hours put in this to get this glue and stuff off of the floor, but stay tuned here to see kind of the different steps that we had to go through in order to get this floor out and then also back in. So the first step of, putting the new flooring in is obviously getting the old stuff out, and this is absolutely a disaster. You can just see the dirt in there. It makes you kind of think about your own boat, I'm sure. So I'm going to rip this out as much as possible and then get the shop vac in here so we don't get this stuff all in the new pumps and everything that we installed here a few days ago. So basically just pulling this up, and then we're going to put a little acetone in there and getting the floor prepped for the final surface. I'm sure you can tell the kind of mess here, even though we vacuumed this multiple times and even power washed the boat before we took any of the carpet up. You can kind of just see how much gets down in there and why I'm not a huge fan of carpet in the first place. But just moving this thing around is just crazy, the amount of dirt. I mean, you can just see this here. Again, like I said, no matter how many times we vacuumed it or shop vac'd it, underneath it just trapped. But a lot of that came up. We used a little bit of acetone just in a real small area here to get that glue up, and it came up really pretty quick. So it's actually going to be a little bit easier job than I thought. So we're going to pour some acetone here in the floor. We're going to be pretty generous with it. But the one thing you really got to be careful of is not getting it. That's why I kind of had some of the seat holes plugged here. Is not to get it in any of the holes or anything that's going to go down. I got my gas tank down here. You don't want this stuff wearing and tearing on any of your hoses or anything else that could be down there. But you can see, just scraping like that, you can see this stuff piling up pretty easy. And big deep sections like that, just a few seconds of sitting, you can see how cleaned up that gets and how fast and how easy it is. So again, I wouldn't want to do an aircraft carrier deck with this, but it's been a fairly easier project than I thought it was going to be. So sometimes you Google things, sometimes you call a buddy. And my buddy Terry Brown at Wired to Fish told me you need to use one of these little oscillating tools with the firm scraper blade. And that was a key deal. We used the flexible one, did not work so good, but a little bit of acetone on the deck here. And just in a matter of probably 30 seconds, we got a 2 square foot area. All this glue that you couldn't even see came up. So then we can go through with the acetone and the rag and clean that up. But all that nasty adhesive, I mean, in a matter of minutes. So as they say, having the right tools, the right deal for the job, just like fishing. Cleaning up the floor is really important because just like in a painting process, the prep is probably as much importance as the installation or the final act. And throughout this process, we kind of started with this little oscillating tool with the rigid scraper, and that really worked well as it turns out, because again, we're new at this first time with getting the massive mounts when it was really thick and noticeable. But when it's kind of thin like it is right here, there's not a lot there, but we definitely have to get it up. The easiest thing by far was throwing some acetone on it, and in areas that I didn't care about that we're definitely not going to see when we have the new flooring down, I used an old chisel here, or just different chiseling things, and basically let that sit for just a little bit, a minute or two, and then I kind of scrape that up. And once I got that mass amount of material, I went through with actually a putty knife, and that seemed to work really well. And then finished up with some clean claws to try to basically get the little stuff. And having a lot of clean rags is really important because, as you can see here, just absolutely, this stuff is just nasty. Glue darn near right, still sticky right to the floor. That's just the last little bit that we got here. So a couple different processes depending on where it's at or how thick it is. Seems to make it go a little faster or a little easier. So when you're doing any of these floorings, even though your buddy may have the exact same boat, these manufacturers of the actual flooring material want to measure this. And they do it several different ways. I've seen lasers, I've seen couple different ways of measuring it, but not using a measuring tape. But that's actually similar to what they kind of did with mine, but just using a camera. So they placed these tiles down and they took pictures of it, and somehow that actually came out to be just perfect with actually knowing all the little intricate details of the floor. So any of these manufacturers that you may hire to actually do the flooring itself, they're probably going to send somebody or have you go to them to actually measure this in some way, shape, or form to order this material custom.
Each of these targets represents a data point that gets put into a CAD system that allows my CAD team to draw the parameters of the boat and get the material exactly right on things like your hatches and draw around things like this, which we call through item. They are all the same distance apart, so your job is completely custom. Every job we do, we get exactly right, because even on the same model, your boats, your hatches and through items like this can be a little bit off, and we want to make sure it's exactly custom.
You know, this flooring is kind of nervous when we had this going down. We had Captain Bob and Captain Chris helping with this. And really, it's very simple. Any of these kind of adhesive floorings, what you're going to want to do is flip that over, use a razor knife to just score the backing and just cut through that. And what we're going to do is we're going to peel back a couple inches in the center on each side of that and actually adhere that down. And that way we can kind of place the flooring piece without actually having the entire thing stick. So we can make sure that it's lined up real good. Then once we do, we basically just hold pressure on one side, we're gonna remove the backing on the other, and then just kind of, you know, smooth that thing out. So it's kind of nerve-wracking, but actually you do a piece or two, it's not very difficult really. You know, as you kind of roll out this flooring, you're gonna know that you're just like putting a decal on. This is just really a giant decal. You want to kind of smooth this thing out, and Captain Chris used a roller to kind of push that down and put pressure on it, which the manufacturers also recommend. But one thing is you're gonna notice, just like a decal, you're gonna get some little bubbles in there, and simply just take a needle or a little razor knife and poke that just a little bit and then roll that to get that air bubble out there, so you get that done before you forget about it, because there definitely was a couple little bubbles in there throughout the process, and now all of a sudden it's dialed in very quickly. One of the parts in the process here with the floor is actually prepping it. It's no different than painting. You know, you have to have that just perfect, because when we put the actual flooring down on top, any inconsistency we're gonna see, so any little hump or anything like that in the floor. So we had to take the time to kind of reseal that floor, because the carpet was much more forgiving. And then we also took the time, since we put new seat bases in. You know, once we were in there, we figured it's just a lot easier to replace everything at one time. And we did have a bad seat base in there to begin with. So we went through and actually are going to seal up those little edges there on the seat bases themselves with just some pure silicone. We taped that area off. But then we took a lot of steps to put some marine adhesive in there in order to kind of smooth out all those areas on that rear center door before we ultimately put the floor on. It's really hard to believe we're on part 11 of the project boat already. A lot of work has been done, and the boat is really feeling like it's coming together, and we can almost actually go and use this now. So we appreciate all the following along, the comments, likes, and shares and things. Make sure you keep doing that. That allows us to keep doing these videos, and we've got a little bit more of the project boat to come, so make sure you stay tuned to the next Tiller Tuesday.